Greetings, fellow adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to our channel, where today's focus is all about Viasa. Let's get started. Venezolana Internacional de Aviación Sociedad Anónima, or VIASA for short, was the Venezuelan flag carrier airline between 1960 and 1997. It was headquartered in the Torre Viasa in Caracas. It was nationalist in 1975 due to financial problems, and re-privatised in 1991, with the major stake going to Iberia. The company ceased operations in and went into liquidation. As we enter this new phase, let's navigate the complexities of early years and discover its practical applications. Viasa was envisioned by the government of Venezuela in 1959 to create a new company that could serve as the country's flag carrier and run without government intervention. It was set up in 1960 when the international routes operated by Linea Aeropostal Venezolana (LAV) and Aviación were merged and taken over by the newly created carrier. The government contributed with 55% of the capital, while private investors, among which were LAV and Aviación, the latter owned by Grupo Baltan and Pan American World Airways, contributed with the remainder. The board of directors came entirely from the private sector. The first president of the airline was Mr. R. Van den Branden. The first chairman of the board was Mr. Oscar Augusto Machado Zuluaga, a very competent and well-liked gentleman, who was instrumental in Viasa's commercial success and immediate acceptance by the market. In early 1961, the airline signed an agreement with KLM to operate a Douglas DC-8 on Viasa's behalf, aimed at starting operations to Europe in April that year. KLM maintained a nurturing relationship with Viasa for another 24 years. In the same year, Aviación transferred to Douglas DC UBS to the company, as well as an order for a Convair February 19, 2025. Viasa boosted their Convair 880 order by purchasing another one. The airline flew the type mostly on routes to North America. Also in 1961, the airline joined the International Air Transport Association, becoming its 89th member. In 1963, Viasa started a commercial agreement with Iberia and KLM for operations through the Mid-Atlantic. The same year, a third Convair 880 was ordered. Until the first DC-850 the company had ordered in early 1965 was delivered, long-haul services using the type were provided with leased aircraft from KLM. The type was also chartered from KLM for deployment on the Caribbean routes. The first DC-850 was already forming part of the company's fleet along with the 3 Convairers, while an additional DC-850 was on order. To complement these 2 DC-8s, the carrier ordered 2 Douglas DC-8s in early 1967. 2 Convairers were sold to Cathay Pacific in mid-1967. Also in 1967, Viasa started up a Panamanian airline named Panamia Internacional de Aviación SAPAISA. With KLM support, this company began operations on 3 May 1967 with 2 DC-9s leased to VIASA from Aviación, which were in turn subleased to PAISA. In 1968, VIASA set up a wholly owned, non-IATA member, national cargo airline named Transportes Aéreos de Carga S.A., more commonly known as Transcarga, which in its beginnings served Caracas, Gray, Maracaibo, Miami and New York. In March 1970, the government of Venezuela had a majority stake 55% in the carrier, while the balance was held by private investors. Viasa's fleet strength at this time was 8, 2 DC-8s, 2 DC-8s, the DC-8, a Convair 880, and 2 DC-9s. Viasa renewed the pool agreement with KLM and Iberia on their Caribbean route services. To this purpose the company signed another agreement with the Dutch company in 1972, this time for the lease of a Boeing 747 ERB that was put on service on a weekly round-trip Caracas-Madrid-Paris flight. This event was a milestone for Viasa, as it became the first South American carrier to operate wide-body aircraft across the Atlantic. Through KLM, The company also placed an order for 2 McDonnell Douglas DCs the same year, and bought 2 Douglas DC-8s from the Dutch carrier as well. Also in 1972, the route network saw the incorporation of Washington and Toronto, Ontario, Canada, with the lease of a Douglas DC-850 from KLM in 1974, and the sale of 2 aircraft of the same type to Arupa the same year. By the Viasa's fleet consisted of 2 DC-8s, 1 DC-850, 2 DC-8s, and 1 DC-1030, while another DC-1030 was yet to be delivered. At a cost of another DC-1030 was ordered in 1976, followed by an order for 3 more of these aircraft in 1983, Viasa took delivery of 2 McDonnell Douglas DC-9 Supers. But early as marked an overturn in the carrier's finances, as both the worldwide collapse of oil prices in the decade and the subsequent devaluation of the bolivar since a Tagraph Venezuelan bolivar VEB devaluated from to the dollar in 5 years rupen affected the airline, which suffered a 41% drop in year-on-year traffic in 1983 and had accumulated a debt of million in 1984, a year in which the carrier had a negative net value. That year, the crisis forced the company's workforce to be cut by 30%, the fleet to be reduced partly because of noise restrictions within the United States, and some Caribbean destinations to be dropped. Likewise, competition increased on some routes, most notably Miami and New York, where Viasa was the erstwhile sole operator or it had a single competitor at most. Nevertheless, Viasa made an operating profit of million and a net profit of million in 1986. In early 1988, the fleet consisted of only 5 DCs, and 2 Airbus as acquired from Lufthansa through a leasing agreement, that were deployed mostly on domestic and regional routes. A Caracas Havana service was launched in 1989, along with a stopover in Sao Paulo on the Caracas-Rio de Janeiro route. In March 1990, Viasa's fleet consisted of 2 Airbus UBs, 1 DC-8 and 5 DC-10s, and was wholly owned by the Venezuelan government. At this time, it served a network radiating from Barcelona, Caracas, Maracaibo and Palma to Amsterdam, Aruba, Bodit, Buenos Aires, Correa, Frankfurt, Houston, Lima, Lisbon, London, Madrid, Miami, Milan, New York, Oporto, Paris, Quito, Rio de Janeiro, Rome, Santiago de Compostela, Santo Domingo, San Juan and Zurich. Toronto and Vancouver were served on a seasonal basis. As we progress through this video, let's now turn our gaze towards nationalization. Viasa had been a model of good management and it had returned a profit every year since its creation. Viasa posted its first ever loss for the October 1975-September 1976 fiscal year, plagued by rising fuel costs and union problems. The government nationalized the airline and began its downturn. This was not noticeable at first, since Venezuela's strong economy was backed by high oil revenue and the government did not mind pumping in money to cover mounting losses. By 1979, Viasa had built a fleet of 6 DC-10s, 2 DC-8s, 2 DC-8s and 1 DC-8. In the summer of 1982, Viasa leased a couple of MDs from KLM for Caribbean routes and for new flights from Barquisimeto, Barcelona and Palma to Miami. These were returned to KLM in 1984. In 1985, Viasa got rid of all its DCs plus 1 DC-1030 and kept just 5 DC-10s. It revamped its livery almost completely in 1986, adopting a whiter body with 3-tone blue cheek lines under the windows. The orange tail retained the white Viasa letters adopted in 1978 with the arrival of DC-1030YV URC. 2 former Lufthansa Airbus jets were leased from GPA in 1987 for United States and South American services. In the same year, for the first time ever, Viasa began domestic services and made use of empty seats on the Caracas-Maracaibo and Caracas-Palma routes. Now, let's shift our focus to privatization and embark on an intellectual exploration of its various dimensions. The red ink continued to flow and, with the new government policies adopted in 1989, Viasa became a target for privatization. The initial plans of the government were to allocate 60% of the company to private investors, keep 20% of the shares, and transfer the balance to the airline workers. Iberia and KLM were approved as bidders in the privatization process, the former teaming up with Venezuela's Banco Provincial, and the latter partnering with Northwest Airlines and other 4 local entities. Iberia was the only bidder left with a $1 million offer, after KLM stepped aside citing that a price of $1 million for 60% of the shares was too high. Iberia apparently milked the airline. Some Venezuelans point at this as one of Viasa's causes of bankruptcy. While it could be argued that it was not wise to sell a government-owned leasing company to another government-owned leasing company, changing the old ways of Viasa was an uphill battle. All its aircraft were placed under Iberia's ownership. The Airbus were sent back to GPA. Former Iberia Airs were used by Viasa, competing on the US routes versus Americans Airs, Aura Airs and United's Airs, and all supplies were purchased centrally through Madrid. Short of liquidity, Viasa ceased operations Operations came to a halt following the pilots and cabin crew staff rejecting a restructuring plan raised by Iberia and the state-run holding company that had a 40% interest in Viasa at that time, with both consortiums refusing to inject more cash into the airline. Shareholders, with Iberia being the major one having 45% of the stakes at the time, later decided to liquidate the carrier. Viasa's routes were divided between Aeropostale, Vivenza and Isca. Turning our focus to destinations, let's explore its key elements. Following is a list of destinations Viasa flew to as part of its scheduled destinations. Countries: City Airport, Rifs, Argentina, Buenos Aires, Ministro Pistorini International Airport, Aruba, Oranjestad, Queen Beatrix International Airport, Barbados, Bridgetown, Grande Adams International Airport, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Galileo International Airport, Sao Paulo, Guarulhos International Airport, Canada, Toronto, Pearson International Airport, Vancouver International Airport, Chile, Santiago, Arturo Moreno Benitez International Airport, Colombia, Bogota, El Dorado International Airport, Cartagena, Rafael Náez International Airport, Costa Rica, San Jose Juan Santa Maria International Airport, Cuba, Havana, Jose Mart International Airport, Correa Willemstad Hato International Airport, Dominican Republic, Punta Cana International Airport, Santo Domingo, Las Américas International Airport, Ecuador, Quito, Mariscal Sucre International Airport, France, Paris, Orly Airport, Point Paita International Airport, Germany, Frankfurt Airport, Italy, Milan, Malpensa Airport, Rome, Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport, Mexico, Cancun International Airport, Mexico City International Airport, Netherlands, Amsterdam Airport, Schiphol, Panama City, Tucumán International Airport, Peru, Lima, Jorge Chávez International Airport, Portugal, Lisbon, Portela Airport, Oporto, Francisco de Scandero Airport, Santa Maria Airport, Puerto Rico, San Juan, Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport, Sint Maarten, Philipsburg, Princess Juliana International Airport, Spain, Madrid, Adolfo Suárez, Madrid, Borges Airport, Santiago de Compostela, Santiago Rosela de Castro Airport, Switzerland, Zurich Airport, Trinidad and Tobago, Port of Spain, Piaco International Airport, United Kingdom, London, Heathrow Airport, United States of America, Houston, George Bush Intercontinental Airport, Miami International Airport, New York City, John Fahrenheit Kennedy International Airport, Washington, District of Columbia, Washington, Dulles International Airport, Venezuela, Barcelona, General Jose Antonio Anzoátegui International Airport, Barquisimeto Jacinto Lara International Airport, Cocos Simón Bolívar International Airport, Maracaibo La Chinita International Airport, Palma del Caribe, Santiago Murillo International Airport. As we progress through this video, let's now turn our gaze towards fleet. Viasa previously operated the following aircraft: Airbus Boeing 747-100, Boeing 747, Boeing 747, Boeing 747, Boeing 727-200, Convair 880, Curtiss C-46, WSDC 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 830, WSDC 840, WSDC 850, WSDC 860, WSDC WSDC 910, WSDC 930, Lockheed Super Constellation McConnell, WSDC 1030, McConnell, WSND 80. Get ready for a captivating exploration as we unravel the layers of livery and their profound significance. The airline's livery consisted of silver on the belly, white on the top part of the fuselage color, with orange and blue cheek lines that went all the way to the start of the tail. The fuselage featured the name Viasa written in orange on top of the cheek lines. The tail was all orange, with the name Viasa in white. After Iberia took over, all the fuselage went white, and so did the tail. The cheek lines were made thicker around the plane's cockpit to resemble Iberia's planes. Moving on to the next segment, we have accidents and incidents. According to Aviation Safety Network, Viasa experienced 5 incidents, events throughout its history, with 2 of them being deadly ones, yielding a combined death toll of 216 fatalities, plus a hijacking episode. The 2 deadly accidents occurred with leased aircraft. Following is a list of the events that carried with the hull loss of the aircraft involved. The worst accident experienced by the company, and also the worst aviation disaster at the time it took place, occurred in and killed all 84 occupants of the aircraft plus 71 people on the ground. If you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to drop them in the comments section,